So this is our lesson on the Spartans and on Sparta. So we'll learn about this city-state, this polis, to understand why it was so brutal and to develop our historical thinking skills. Lots of key words here: city-state, all pretty straightforward. Infanticide is the killing of babies. The Agoge is a Spartan school system. So let's get straight into it. Spartans are pretty famous as soldiers. Greek hoplite soldiers. See lots of images all the time of Spartans fighting. That's the main thing they're famous for. But where is Sparta and what was it? Sparta is a city-state, a polis, like Athens, like Argos, like the rest of them. It's roughly here. This is what's called the Peloponnese. If you look at a map of Greece, these three fingers here is the Peloponnese. Here's a map of it in a wider Greek context. That's the Peloponnese, just there. And Athens is over here. It's a place called Attica. The Peloponnese is where Sparta is. So Sparta is here. But you can see it's unlike other Greek city-states. It actually conquered lots of other Greek lands. Yeah. And that's why it's so powerful. So Sparta's this place here, but they've conquered and controlled all this land here. We'll do more work on that in a moment. Peloponnese, that's where it is. Now, one of the most famous aspects of Sparta was babies. What happened when a baby was born in Sparta and why? When a baby was born, it was inspected by an elder, a member of the Gerousia. It's a 30-man council that helps run Sparta. One of these old guys, one of these 30 Gerousias, would inspect the baby. If it looked ill or sickly or was disabled, it was taken to the apothete, which is a hillside, and left to die. Yeah. Male or female, boy or girl, if it looked like a weakling, a member of the Gerousia would say this child can't survive in Sparta, can't be a Spartan. It was taken to the apothete, which means dumping ground in Greek, and dumped. Then, when you're 7, boys leave their families voluntarily, no one's forcing you, just the Spartan way, Spartan culture, and you go into the Agoge. Schools, this it translates in Greek as upbringing. In the Agoge, you practice for war. The curriculum is fighting with spears, fighting with shields, hand-to-hand fighting, lots of fitness training, lots of endurance training. Yeah. Hard military life from the age of 7. It steadily gets more and more violent as you get older. As you might know, the boys were deliberately not fed enough. It's for 2 reasons. One, they wanted to make them become accustomed to operating when there's not enough food. In a war, you might not be fed regularly. So they wanted to get the boys used to the fact that you may not always have regular meals. Plus, the boys are encouraged to steal. They've got to sneak out of the Agoge, steal food, and get back in without being caught. And that's the key. It's not the stealing, it's the not being caught that's important. If you are caught, you're in trouble. But not for stealing, you're in trouble for being caught. The idea is to teach them stealth, how to move quietly, how to not be caught, how not to be observed. Which is sort of linked to the next bit. So if all the Spartans are soldiers and all the boys are in the Agoge, who's doing the work? And there's only about between 5,000 and 10,000 Spartans at any one time. Spartan men, Spartiates they're called. Just write it there. For a full Spartan, you are a Spartiate. Let's change that. It's only about 10,000 at most. Who's doing the work? Slaves, called helots. Remember I said earlier, Sparta had conquered this whole area. the people in this area, some of them were called helots. They're slaves. They literally work for the Spartans. Not all of them. The people living around here are not helots. So they're the Spartans. These people are not, they're conquered by the Spartans, but they're not helots, confusingly. You might like, in the exam, the examiner would like this if you knew that they were called the perioikoi. The people who live around, the perioikoi. So Spartans, perioikoi, helots, doing all the work for the Spartans. So they're the Spartan potters, the Spartan blacksmiths, the Spartan cooks, Spartan cleaners. So you're in this agoge, it's 18, what's the final exam? The final exam is to sneak out and murder a helot while they're working. And hide the body, get back, not get caught. Again, it teaches them stealth. But yet also something a bit darker going on here. This idea of the Spartans living for war is true, but war on who? The Spartans lived in a perpetual state of war with their helots. They were terrified of a helot uprising. That's why they trained so hard for war, so if there was an uprising, they could kill the helots easily. If you become good at killing helots, sneaking around, murdering them, you can join the secret service, the Crypteia, and it's their job to go around any helot that looks like he might, be a bit clever, a bit rebellious. He's got to go. He's got to be murdered, and that's what the Crypteia's job is. So the Spartans were constantly at war, but they were mostly at war with their own slaves. In their own heads, they were terrified of a slave uprising because there are so few Spartiates and so many helots. They were constantly in fear of a slave uprising. Right, Spartan system of government. You probably know, you've heard of King Leonidas, but he's only one of the two kings. Sparta was a diarchy, meaning two monarchs, more than one monarch at the same time. Two royal families, both said to be the descendants of Hercules, the god, the demigod. That's not true, obviously. But the kings don't have much power. They're not absolute monarchs. The Cyrus and Darius and Xerxes of Persia are absolute monarchs. If they say, cut that guy's head off, that guy's head gets cut off. It's not like that in Sparta, the kings. They're more they're generals. The king is the leader of the Spartan army when they go to war. They don't really rule Sparta day to day. That's left up to the ephors and the gerousia. Gerousia, we've already talked about, the guys who inspect the papers. That's a 30-man council of elders who do all the voting on what we're going to do, should we do this. But day to day, Sparta is run by the 5 ephors. Another 5 more elected officials elected for 1 year, and they're the ones who get to run the city day to day. The king of Sparta can't do anything where the ephors and the gerousias say so. And finally, the word laconic. Right, takes a bit of explaining this. The city is called Sparta. The area around the city is called Laconia. So Spartans are Laconians, right? That's the word laconic. And laconic is a way of speaking. Spartans didn't like to talk very much. They didn't like to make fancy speeches. They liked to say a few things, but in a very snappy way. One-liners. Stay calm, don't smile, just say something really clever. So when Dionysius said to an ally, when the ally said to him, there's so many Persian archers, when they shoot their arrows, they will blot out the sun. Dionysius said, good, then we'll fight in the shade. That's a laconic saying. That's a laconic style of speech, and the Spartans were very famous for it.